Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Matt opened his shed for a simple garage sale, he didn't expect to spark a suburban war. But one clipboard-wielding HOA tyrant had other plans. What began with rusty tools and old lawn chairs turned into a battle for freedom, neighbors, and the soul of the cul-de-sac. It was early Saturday morning when I rolled up the door to my old metal-sided shed, revealing 2 decades worth of what I generously called useful stuff. To most folks, it probably looked like a junkyard in miniature: old tools, rusted lawn equipment, mismatched patio furniture, boxes full of wires I kept just in case. But to me, it was the memory bank of a man who'd worked with his hands, collected parts, and never quite managed to throw anything away. I decided earlier in the week to finally clear it all out. Not for the money. Hell, I wasn't desperate, but because it was time. My back was tired of navigating around a busted snowblower from '97, so I printed off a few simple flyers, stapled them to telephone poles near the local diner, grocery, and gas station, and told a few neighbors. No online listings, no signs on the highway, just word of mouth and some tape. By 8:30, I had a couple folding tables set up at the edge of my 2-acre property, just beyond the gravel semicircle that passed for a driveway. I laid out socket sets, a couple of refurbished drills, a fire pit I welded back together last year, and even an ancient but still working record player I figured would make some hipsters week. A few folks stopped by, asked polite questions, haggled over prices. Nothing big, just neighborly interaction the way it used to be before every step required a permit and a 12-digit form number. At 10:07 exactly, I heard tires crunch across the gravel. I looked up expecting another pickup or maybe an old Buick, but what pulled in was a bone-white BMW X5 with blacked-out windows and a shiny Cielo Ridge Estates HOA magnet on the driver's side door. I exhaled slowly. Here we go. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in crisp slacks, a light blue blouse, and a HOA badge hanging from her neck like she was with the FBI. Blonde bob, sunglasses, clipboard. I knew the type the second she clicked her door shut. "You must be the one running the unauthorized sale," she said. Not even a hello. I blinked. Well, I wouldn't call it unauthorized. It's a garage sale. On my land. She looked around like the grass might give her disease. This is within visual range of Cielo Ridge Estates, and we have strict guidelines on exterior disturbances, commerce, and visual pollution. Visual pollution? I chuckled. "Ma'am, this is a folding table with a coffee maker and a box of screwdrivers." She didn't smile. "I'm Karen Larson, president of the HOA, and this sale is a disruption. These types of events attract foot traffic, loiterers, noise. We can't have that affecting the aesthetic of our neighborhood." I scratched my temple. "Your neighborhood ends 4 houses back. My property isn't part of your HOA." Her tone turned syrupy, the kind people use when trying to speak slowly to a toddler. "Sir, we're expanding our enforcement zone to include bordering parcels. It's called a buffer zone for community standards." I stared at her. "Let me save you the trouble. There's no legal jurisdiction for that. I'm not in your HOA. This is my land. I'm allowed to have a garage sale." She didn't answer right away, just pulled out her phone and started taking photos. My tables, the sign, the cars parked neatly on the gravel. Then she made a call. I couldn't hear every word, but phrases like code violation, public nuisance, and requesting response unit floated over. "Did you just call the cops?" I asked. "They'll handle it," she said, and walked back to her car. "If you care about your reputation, I'd pack it up now." I watched her drive off, heart thumping, not in fear, but in disbelief. A garage sale, on my land, in America, and some neighborhood dictator thought she had a badge and authority. The rest of the morning passed in slow motion. I kept selling old drill bits, a pressure washer with a leaky hose, and even the ceramic rooster lamp I inherited from my uncle. Buyers came and went, some chuckling at the Karen alert I'd taped under the cash box. Still, I kept one eye on the road. At 11:30, 2 police cruisers rolled up and parked nose out near my fence line. A couple of officers stepped out, one young and stiff like he was fresh from academy, the other older, with the posture of a man who'd dealt with far too many barking dogs and HOA disputes. Both walked toward me calmly. "Morning," I said, lifting my coffee. "Sir, we received a call about an unlicensed commercial sale occurring here," the younger one said, eyes scanning the tables. I gestured to the house behind me. "This is my home, my land. I'm having a garage sale, not exactly bootlegging whiskey." The older cop squinted at the address on his tablet. "This is not part of Cielo Ridge." "Nope," I said, pulling out my ID and deed copy from a folder I'd already prepared. "It's county land, outside their HOA. No ordinances violated unless selling a 30-year-old bench vise is suddenly a felony." He chuckled slightly and flipped through the paperwork. The younger officer wrote something down but seemed less sure. Just then, Karen returned. She pulled up behind the cruisers and marched straight toward us, heels clicking like a metronome of arrogance. "Officers, thank God," she said. "This man is conducting a sale that's affecting property values and traffic flow in our neighborhood. I demand he be cited." The older cop turned toward her slowly. "Ma'am, this land isn't within Cielo Ridge jurisdiction. This appears to be a private garage sale on private property." "But it affects us," she insisted. "People are driving through our streets to get here. Some of them don't even live here." I raised an eyebrow. "That's usually how yard sales work." Karen's face twisted like she'd bitten a lemon. "You're mocking the community." "I'm mocking you, Karen." The younger cop looked like he was trying not to laugh. The older one sighed and handed back my paperwork. "Everything's in order here. We're not issuing any citations. Have a good day, Mr. Faulkner." "Thank you, officers." Karen wasn't done. "I'll escalate this. Don't think this is over." I didn't answer. I just turned and sold a broken toaster oven to an old guy with a cowboy hat for $5. The next morning started off quiet, but I knew better than to believe it would stay that way. After the scene yesterday, I figured Karen was either licking her wounds or sharpening her clipboard. I was leaning toward the second. Around 10, while I was reorganizing the remaining items from yesterday's sale, I heard tires again, not the familiar rattle of a local pickup, but the whir of something newer and more pretentious. I glanced up and spotted the same white BMW from the day before, parked across the street this time, nose angled toward my fence like it was sniffing for violations. Karen wasn't alone. She had a passenger, some pale, angular man in khakis with a laptop bag and a sour expression that made her look cheerful by comparison. They didn't come onto my property. They just sat in the car, windows cracked, eyes fixed, the kind of surveillance you'd expect from someone who thought they were filming an expose. I gave them a wave. Karen didn't wave back. I got back to work, selling an old bench grinder, a bundle of cables, and a busted pressure washer that some college kid insisted he could Frankenstein back to life. I wasn't even haggling. Everything was priced to move, and most of the folks stopping by were locals just glad to find decent tools without a 40% markup at the chain stores. At 11:20, I saw Karen's SUV drive off. 10 minutes later, a black Nissan Altima pulled up. A new face stepped out. Woman in business, casual, with a laminated badge hanging from her neck. She walked straight up to me and introduced herself as Maria Ruiz from the New Mexico Department of Taxation and Revenue. "I'm here following up on a complaint of unlicensed commercial activity," she said politely, already flipping open a tablet. I forced a smile. "You're the second person in 2 days to tell me that. First was the police. You're welcome to look around. This is a garage sale. You want a lamp from 1978? I'll give you a discount." She didn't laugh, but she didn't look hostile either. I explained the situation. One-time sale, no business license because there's no business, cash only, no signage off the property. I even handed her a short list of yesterday's sales, not because I had to, but because I wanted her to see how absurd this was. Maria nodded thoughtfully. "You're likely in the clear, but technically, if this repeats weekly or is advertised as a regular operation, it could require registration." "Understood," I said. "This is spring cleaning, not enterprise." She gave me a card. "I'll file my report. No action at this time." Then she looked over her shoulder. Just out of curiosity, was that HOA lady involved? I raised an eyebrow. She didn't give her name, but if she smelled like hairspray and authority, yeah. That'd be her. Maria smirked. "Thought so." After she left, I took a breath and sat down behind the table. I wasn't rattled, but I wasn't happy either. Karen had escalated again. I knew her type. She wouldn't stop until I either moved out or knelt before her HOA handbook. A few hours later, my neighbor Dwight stopped by. Retired air traffic controller, not the chatty kind, but reliable. He handed me a small manila envelope and said, "Figured you might want to know what she's sending around." Inside were copies of printed emails, HOA board memos, one from Karen to all Cielo Ridge residents, warning them about unauthorized transient activity bordering our community and encouraging residents to document all irregular traffic patterns and report any encounters with aggressive individuals near the property line. There was even a sentence that made me laugh out loud. While the seller claims to be a resident, we have yet to verify any formal registration with the HOA or receive application for external activity approval. I underlined claims to be a resident and read it again. Apparently, living on my own land was now just a claim. But the real gem was the attached addendum, a draft letter Karen had prepared for residents to sign, a complaint to the city council urging immediate action to protect our community standards from encroaching unsanctioned commercial behavior. Dwight shook his head. "She brought it around this morning, wanted me to sign. I told her I'd rather eat sand." "You get a copy." "Pretended to be interested, said I'd read it. Scanned it. Figured you ought to know. Appreciate it, man." Then came the kicker. Around 4 that afternoon, a minivan pulled up and parked along the public road next to my fence. A woman and her husband got out carrying their toddler, smiling as they approached. They'd seen my flyer and drove over from the east side looking for cheap garden tools. As I started showing them some stuff near the back of the shed, I heard a voice yelling from down the street. "Excuse me, you're trespassing." It was Karen, standing at the edge of her HOA's road, phone in hand, snapping photos of the family. The dad turned, confused. "We're on public land." "You're encroaching on a sensitive community corridor," she snapped. The mother looked stunned. "We're parked on the road." Karen pointed to their car. "That is a violation of Cielo Ridge parking rules." I walked up and called over to her. "Karen, that's a public road. It's outside your HOA. You're harassing people again." "You're encouraging unsafe conditions for children," she shouted. The mother clutched her toddler tighter, and the dad's face hardened. "Lady, get lost." Karen made a dramatic show of dialing her phone. "I'm reporting this, all of this, to the council, to code enforcement, and to the HOA legal team." The dad scoffed. "Tell them to kiss your badge." They got in their van and left. I stood there, watching her retreat. Phone glued to her ear, finger wagging like she was in front of Congress. I went inside and opened a folder. I added Dwight's printouts, jotted down the date, labeled it Karen Phase 2. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. She was crossing into legal intimidation, using her title like a weapon, and if she thought I was going to fold because she threw buzzwords like sanctioned activity or visual impact zone, she didn't know who she was dealing with. The next morning, I barely had time to pour my coffee before the doorbell rang. Standing there was a courier in a bright orange vest holding a stiff envelope with a city seal. He handed it to me without a word and left. Inside was a formal letter from the Albuquerque Community Development Office requesting clarification on ongoing activity adjacent to HOA monitored zones suspected of violating city ordinances regarding unlicensed outdoor commerce. The language was careful, bureaucratic, and just vague enough to be threatening. There was also a note requesting a voluntary compliance interview downtown the following week. Voluntary my ass. I could smell Karen's perfume on the paper. I poured myself another cup and went to my office, pulling out the folder labeled Karen Phase 2. Time to step it up. I'd hoped she'd wear herself out, but clearly she wasn't slowing down, so neither would I. By midday, I'd sent out 5 emails, one to a retired lawyer I knew from my days at the Planning Commission, 2 to local residents who had been verbally harassed by Karen, and another to Maria from the tax department, thanking her for her professionalism and casually mentioning the escalation. The last email went to a contact I hadn't used in years, Devin Moore, a local journalist who covered civic harassment and HOA abuse stories. I attached scans of the HOA letters, Dwight's printouts, and a video snippet from one of my buyers whose dash cam had recorded Karen yelling at his wife in the street. By 2 p.m., I had my first response. Devin replied in all caps, "Are you kidding me?" Followed by, "This smells like gold-plated HOA overreach. I want the full story. Can we meet tomorrow?" I said yes. Later that day, a couple I didn't recognize pulled up in a rust-red Ford Escape. They got out, looked nervous, but walked up anyway. The husband introduced himself as Dean, said he was from the western end of Cielo Ridge. His wife stayed quiet, glancing around like she expected Karen to drop out of a tree. She threatened to fine us for interacting with an unregulated sale, he said. We didn't even buy anything. We were walking our dog and waved at you. I raised an eyebrow. That's worth a fine now. She sent a letter, he said, holding out a copy. It was printed on HOA letterhead, claiming that non-resident engagement with unauthorized vendors along district boundaries could lead to citation under Article 14 of the Community Standards. There is no Article 14, Dean said flatly. We checked. He handed me the paper and added, We're not the only ones. She's threatening everyone who walks by your property. That night, I made a call to my cousin. We hadn't talked in over a year. Not for any bad reason, just life moving fast. Jason Faulkner, current mayor of Albuquerque. We grew up together, shot BB guns at cans behind my uncle's barn, and helped each other move at least 3 times over the years. He owed me one, and I had the emotional blackmail ammo to prove it, specifically a VHS tape of him falling through a deck he swore was totally stable. He picked up after the second ring. Matt, I saw your name on a memo this morning. Something about a yard sale and a very angry lady? Yep, I said. It's a circus, and she's the ringmaster. I explained the entire thing. The calls, the letters, the surveillance, the threats to neighbors, the city memo, the media interest. Jason went quiet for a beat. You know what's funny? He said. She called my office last week, demanding we classify the land around Cielo Ridge as a quiet community buffer zone with HOA-administered oversight. What did you say? I told her to submit it in writing. She did. It was 14 pages long and included an aerial map with your house marked in red Sharpie. I laughed. So she's gunning for annexation now. She's gunning for something, all right, Jason said. But here's what we're going to do. I'll handle this on the city side. You keep doing what you're doing. Gather evidence. Talk to people. If she crosses any more lines, I'll make sure the right people know. Appreciate it, I said. The next day, Devin the journalist arrived at my property with a small camera and a notepad. She didn't waste time. This lady actually tried to fine people for waving? She also called the cops, the tax department, the city, and probably NASA. Devin interviewed me on the porch. She filmed parts of the sale, what was left of it, and captured 2 separate neighbors stopping by to give statements. One of them, a high school teacher, said Karen followed her daughter home from school last week after she bought an old lamp from me. By the end of the day, Devin had enough footage for a segment and promised it'd air by Friday evening. Before she left, she asked, Do you mind if I knock on a few doors in the HOA? Knock yourself out, I said. Wear something flame retardant. I watched her walk off toward Cielo Ridge, notebook in hand, press badge bouncing. I didn't envy her, but I respected the hustle. That night, I went over everything I'd collected. Statements, photos, camera footage, emails, formal letters. I arranged it all chronologically, added sticky notes where needed, and scanned it into a digital archive. I wasn't just documenting harassment anymore. I was building a case. Karen wanted a war. I wasn't backing down. She may have had a clipboard and a fantasy of authority, but I had something better: facts, witnesses, a cousin in the mayor's office, and a growing number of neighbors who were done being silent. And I hadn't even played my ace yet. By Thursday morning, it felt like the entire block was holding its breath. Karen hadn't shown her face since the journalist visited, and that in itself was suspicious. I knew her type too well. When they go quiet, they're not retreating, they're plotting. Just after 10, while I was stacking the few unsold items back into the shed, my phone buzzed. Devin's name lit up the screen. Check channel 4 at 6, she said, her voice practically vibrating. You're gonna love it. That gave me about 8 hours to prepare for impact. I didn't tell anyone right away. I spent the afternoon like any other, fixing a loose fence board, sanding down a piece of wood I'd found under a tarp, drinking tea out of an old coffee mug that said, World's Okayest Plumber. But when the sun started to dip behind the ridge and the golden light painted everything like a Norman Rockwell postcard, I went inside, grabbed a beer, and flipped on the TV. What Devin aired was brutal. The segment opened with B-roll of peaceful neighborhood streets and my makeshift garage sale, set to some light, ironic piano music. Then came the interviews. Me, two neighbors, and a clip from the couple with the toddler explaining how Karen had screamed at them for parking legally near my fence. But the real punch came next. Devin had managed to get a recorded phone call between Karen and a city clerk. In it, Karen could be heard demanding that they immediately enforce visual standards on bordering zones, followed by, "This man is trashing the view from our community, and if he's related to that joke of a mayor, then he should be doubly ashamed." The final scene showed Karen herself, ambushed outside her BMW in a grocery store parking lot. "Mrs. Larson, do you believe it's appropriate to issue threats and false legal claims to non-HOA residents?" Devin asked. Karen stared at the camera like it had just insulted her handbag. "You don't understand the responsibility I carry. People like me are trying to preserve standards, not destroy them." "Are those standards worth harassing children and falsifying HOA powers?" Devin asked. Karen walked off without another word. The clip ended with Devin summarizing the growing outrage. The emails her station had already received from residents of Cielo Ridge who'd seen the letters, and one anonymous statement from a former board member who said Karen had gone rogue years ago. I didn't have time to savor it. Within 5 minutes of the report airing, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Messages from neighbors, former co-workers, and one very amused cousin, the mayor himself. Jason called me around 7:30. "I've never had a better moment as mayor than watching that woman get mic dropped on local news." "Good to hear I can still make your day. Mr. Mayor Jason wasn't laughing long." "Listen, this has gotten bigger. I just had my communications director brief me on a growing chain of complaints. Some new, some old, all pointing to Karen abusing her position for years. Selective enforcement, made-up rules, false citations." "She's got a whole HOA board behind her," I said. "Or she did." Jason cleared his throat. "That's the thing. I got a call this morning from someone on that board. They want to talk, off the record." That was unexpected. "Why?" "They say Karen's been acting unilaterally, making threats, signing letters with forged board votes. She's even been collecting fines in cash and not reporting them to the HOA treasury." My eyebrows went up. "That's embezzlement." Bingo. I stood there, letting that sink in. So now what? I've already looped in the city ethics office, but this may be criminal. If enough board members are willing to talk, I'm kicking this over to the county prosecutor. I nodded slowly. "Let me know if they need statements. I've got a stack of them." He chuckled. "Oh, I'll let them know. But heads up, you might be getting a visit soon." Sure enough, the very next morning, I got one. A pair of detectives from the county's property crime unit knocked on my door, accompanied by a city legal liaison. They were polite but serious, asked for any documents I had about Karen's conduct, the HOA letters, tax complaints, trespassing incidents. I gave them everything. Digital files, hard copies, video clips, statements. I even had a time-stamped screenshot of her taking photos of my customers' license plates. They stayed for nearly 2 hours. One of the detectives, a tired-looking woman named Morales, thanked me before leaving. "We've dealt with HOA disputes before," she said, "but this is something else entirely. If half of this is verified, and it looks like it will be, she's in real trouble." I didn't smile. I wasn't gloating. I was just tired. That afternoon, I noticed a change in the air. Neighbors I barely knew were walking by, waving, some even stopping to chat. A man from 3 streets over brought me banana bread and said, "Thanks for standing up to that tyrant. We were all afraid." I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just wanted to sell a busted air compressor and maybe an antique blender or two without a war erupting on my gravel. But I knew it now. This was bigger than my driveway. And Karen. She wasn't invisible anymore. Her little kingdom had a spotlight shining right through it, and people were finally watching. The silence didn't last long. By Sunday morning, Karen had resurfaced, louder, angrier, and even more delusional than before. I knew this because I found a glossy, full-color flyer taped to my mailbox and shoved under the windshield wipers of every car parked along my road. The headline was printed in all caps, "Don't let illegal vendors devalue our community." Below it was a photo of my property, taken from what I assume was a passing car, with my tables circled in red. The flyer continued with phrases like public safety hazard, unauthorized activity breeding criminal behavior, and a known associate of political corruption. That last one made me spit my coffee out. Political corruption, I muttered aloud. Is she accusing me of racketeering over a 50-cent socket set? A few neighbors had received the same flyer. Some knocked on my door, bewildered. Others texted me photos. One person called the number listed at the bottom of the page, which redirected to Karen's voicemail and, according to the caller, was full of threats and whimpering about the fall of society. I wasn't surprised. I was, however, finished playing defense. I drafted a formal complaint citing civil harassment, defamation, and malicious interference with legal property use. I attached a copy of the flyer, video of her confrontations, neighbor statements, and city correspondence. My attorney neighbor, Stan, helped me finalize the language. We submitted it Monday morning to the city ombudsman, the police department, and the county legal office. That was the opening salvo. By Tuesday, things got serious. A representative from the Albuquerque Office of Community Oversight called to inform me that an internal ethics probe had been formally opened into the Cielo Ridge HOA's leadership. Several anonymous board members had come forward, confirming what Jason warned me about last week. Apparently, Karen had been bypassing HOA votes entirely, issuing citations solo, collecting fines in cash, and rewriting portions of the bylaws without approval. One former treasurer stated that she had seen Karen white out and reprint documents, then file them as originals. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't backing down. She held a community meeting in the Cielo Ridge clubhouse on Wednesday evening. I wasn't invited, but I didn't have to be. Someone live-streamed it to a Facebook group called Cielo Ridge Against the Madness. The video showed Karen in a pale blue blazer standing in front of a slideshow titled Defending Our Borders, the Fight Against Illegal Sales and Political Favoritism. She spent 30 minutes ranting about property contamination, outside influences, and the terrifying rise of unsanctioned garage culture. At one point, she cited economic terrorism as a reason why neighborly gatekeeping must be enforced. It was bonkers. Entertaining, sure, but also disturbing. That same night, someone vandalized the community bulletin board near my driveway. Not with spray paint or slurs. No, they zip-tied a laminated sign to it that read, "No HOA, no tyranny, yes garage sales." I didn't put it there, but I laughed for a solid 5 minutes. The next day, Karen showed up in person again. She stormed onto the public easement near my property line, waving a manila envelope, and started shouting to no one in particular. "I have filed an emergency injunction," she yelled. "This property is subject to code violation penalties, and this man is in violation of environmental concerns and traffic law." I stepped out onto my porch holding a coffee and a small Bluetooth speaker, which I turned up as she ranted. I'd queued up yakety sax. It made her pacing look like an outtake from a low-budget slapstick movie. Karen screamed that I was mocking the civic process. I smiled and sipped my coffee. Only when the civic process involves you. A few people gathered across the street, recording her. One neighbor yelled, "Karen, you're losing it!" She screamed back that we were all complicit in property sabotage. Then the flashing lights rolled up. A county sheriff cruiser parked at the curb and outstepped Deputy Harris, a no-nonsense woman I recognized from one of the prior calls. She asked Karen to step away from my fence, and after a few more yells about buffer zones and active insurgency, she was placed in the back of the squad car, not arrested, but removed for disturbing the peace. Harris turned to me and said dryly, "Still got that rusty old waffle iron. I need a new paperweight." I handed it to her. No charge. After Karen was driven off, one of the HOA board members, finally emboldened, walked up and introduced himself. Middle-aged guy named Alan. He looked tired, but relieved. "I just want you to know," he said, "we've had enough. We're organizing a special board vote to remove her. She doesn't speak for the rest of us." "Good," I said, "because if she keeps this up, she'll be speaking in front of a judge." He nodded. "We're sorry. We really are." That evening, as the sun set and the street quieted again, I sat out front under my porch light, watching a few cars cruise by. Several of them honked. Someone shouted, "Love your sign." I hadn't put up a sign, but someone had stuck a cardboard arrow in my lawn that read, "Freedom Zone, next driveway." I let it stay. 2 days after Karen's HOA emergency meeting unraveled into viral farce and squad car intervention, things began shifting in a way I didn't expect. And I don't mean the good kind. The calm that followed her public meltdown was too clean, too quiet, like the pause before a lightning strike. Friday morning, I received a thick envelope in my mailbox, certified and stamped with a return address from a local law firm. Inside was a cease and desist letter, formatted with more legal jargon than sense, accusing me of continuous disruptive conduct in direct violation of community standards, intentional degradation of neighborhood reputation, and my personal favorite, knowingly weaponizing familial connections for political shielding. At the bottom, a signature in fat blue ink, Karen L. Larson, titled as both private citizen and President Emeritus of Cielo Ridge Estates HOA. President Emeritus. She was out, but clearly not down. Less than 2 hours later, I got a visit from two sharply dressed individuals claiming to represent the Neighborhood Beautification Council, a non-governmental group that, as far as I could tell, consisted of Karen, her cousin, and maybe a motivational poster about order and elegance. They stood on the sidewalk and informed me that my garage sale aura had spread trash psychologically into the minds of HOA members and asked me to issue a public apology. I told them I'd issue a public refund for anyone who had their soul damaged by a rusty hedge trimmer. They didn't laugh. After they left, I called Jason. "She's escalating again." "Yeah," he sighed. "I heard. She sent a mass email to city council members claiming that the recent increase in raccoons is due to your trash trading scheme." Raccoons. Yep, she even attached grainy footage of a possum. He wasn't joking. By now, I'd stopped reacting with frustration. My folder of evidence had become a binder, every interaction documented, every flyer, threat, fake regulation, and absurdity cataloged. Even the raccoon terror video had its own tab. Then, the real hit came. Saturday morning, a white envelope appeared at my front door, not in the mailbox, just dropped silently. It wasn't from the city, or police, or HOA. It was a private contractor notice claiming I was being sued by the HOA for damages related to economic defamation, improper public gatherings, and emotional instability induced upon residents. It wasn't from a real court. The letterhead said, Cielo Ridge Civic Tribunal. I burst out laughing. A fake court. She'd invented a court. I scanned the document, forwarded it to Stan, my neighbor and former attorney, and asked if I was reading this right. He wrote back in all caps, "Do not reply to that insane crayon-fueled nightmare." Karen had lost the board, lost the title, and lost the neighborhood's support. But she hadn't lost her ego. She was inventing authority now. And then, like karma ordering dessert, the real world caught up. On Monday morning, I got a call from the office of the state attorney general. "We'd like to speak with you about a developing case." The woman on the phone said, "It involves HOA fund misuse, unauthorized legal intimidation, and potential document fraud." I said I had about 300 pages worth of relevant material. They arranged for a formal statement. 2 investigators came to my property, recorded an interview, took copies of my evidence, and confirmed that I wasn't the only one involved. Turns out Karen had been up to more than just terrorizing me. Over the last few years, she'd issued over 50 unauthorized fines to non-members, filed fraudulent boundary complaints, and even doctored tax reports submitted on behalf of the HOA. Her beautification council had been billing residents for unsolicited landscaping consultations, and one elderly man had paid nearly $1,000 thinking he owed it to the city. When the AG's office reviewed the bank records, thanks to whistleblowers from the HOA board, they discovered several payments routed to a side company Karen operated under her maiden name. The name of that company? Elegant Integrity Solutions. Elegant Integrity. She was charging people for fabricated violations, funneling the money into her own account, and then using it to file fake lawsuits on fake letterhead. On Wednesday, the county sheriff's office issued a formal warrant. Karen was arrested at home, wearing a velour tracksuit and screaming that she was a diplomat of suburban order. Neighbors stood outside filming it. Some even clapped. The news spread like wildfire. Local news ran the headline, "Former HOA president arrested in suburban fraud scandal. Victims speak out." They showed the clip of her being led to a cruiser, still yelling something about illegal garden gnomes. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. But there was one thing left I needed to do. That Saturday, I printed flyers for a new event. No cash, no prices, just one phrase at the top. Community market, free to all, no HOA, no fees, no Karen. People came from all over the city: farmers, artists, old-timers with radios and wooden toys, kids with lemonade stands. Jason stopped by and gave a little speech. "We don't need a permit to be neighbors," he said, "and we don't need a clipboard to be decent." The crowd applauded. I watched from my folding chair, arms crossed, heart full. We never saw Karen again on our street. But just in case, someone taped a new sign on the telephone pole: "No emeritus, no problems." The days after Karen's arrest felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. The chaos hadn't ended. It just shifted. Her arrest triggered a chain reaction that reached far beyond my garage sale or the dusty edge of Cielo Ridge Estates. Suddenly, HOA abuse was front-page news, and not just locally. By Monday morning, 3 other neighborhoods in the Albuquerque metro area had filed petitions to audit their own HOA leadership. Karen's downfall lit a fire. People were furious, not just at her, but at the idea that someone with a clipboard and no real checks could wage war on their neighbors for years without consequence. Meanwhile, I couldn't walk into a hardware store without someone shaking my hand. People who'd never spoken to me before now waved as they drove by. I even got a letter from a woman across town, someone I'd never met, thanking me for standing up to petty tyranny. She included a photo of her own HOA president measuring her grass with a ruler. I pinned it to my fridge, but not everyone was cheering. On Wednesday, I received a formal letter from Cielo Ridge's newly appointed interim HOA board. It was apologetic, careful, and well-written. They admitted to having been asleep at the wheel, formally disavowed Karen's actions, and asked if I'd consider joining a community roundtable to rebuild trust between HOA members and non-HOA neighbors. They called it Operation Fence Mender. I stared at the paper for a long time before setting it aside. I wasn't sure what answer I had yet. Some fences take more than goodwill to mend. The city, meanwhile, didn't stop at just Karen. Once the AG's office dug deeper, they discovered that 2 of Karen's advisors had been issuing fabricated citations on properties they didn't even have jurisdiction over, including vacant lots and a public park. One man, an ex-cop from out of state, had been acting as a self-declared enforcement officer, flashing a fake badge and threatening to condemn homes unless fees were paid on the spot. Those 2 were arrested that Friday. By the weekend, the city announced new legislation in the works: bills to require transparency in HOA governance, external audits for associations over a certain size, and strict limitations on how and when HOAs can act outside their jurisdiction. Jason, in his capacity as mayor, held a press conference. I wasn't there in person, but I watched it live. Standing behind a row of city officials, he said the following: "Let this be clear, homeowners associations serve a purpose, but that purpose is not control. That purpose is not harassment. That purpose is not abuse of power. What happened in Cielo Ridge is unacceptable. It will not happen again." He didn't mention me by name. He didn't need to. The message was loud and clear. Later that day, I hosted the second free community market in my yard. I wasn't selling anything, just offering space. And people came in droves. A young artist set up a booth with hand-drawn postcards. A local mechanic gave free oil change coupons. 2 elderly women offered homemade chili and played accordion music on the grass. A little boy sold rocks he'd painted like frogs, each with googly eyes and a name tag. One was named Kareen. Jason showed up too. No podium, no speech, just jeans and a t-shirt. He helped park cars and passed out cold bottles of water. At one point, I saw him sitting on the tailgate of an old pickup, laughing with 2 veterans who'd been at my very first sale. One of them wore a shirt that said HOA equals HELL on asphalt. Someone suggested we take a group photo. Dozens of people gathered behind the folding tables, holding signs and smiling. Someone handed me a printed sign to hold up. It read, "This land is not under your jurisdiction." I held it high. That evening, I found myself sitting on the porch, the last of the guests gone. The lights dimmed, a cool breeze came in off the mesa, and the scent of grilled corn still hung in the air. I sipped a beer and stared up at the stars. Then a familiar voice spoke behind me. "So you gonna come to the round table?" I turned. It was Alan, the interim HOA chair, hands in his pockets, looking a little nervous. "We're not trying to recruit you. We're just trying to do things different now. For real." I thought about it, about the flyers, the threats, the fake courts, the cameras. Then I thought about the neighbors who stood up, the people who came forward, the laughter in the yard that day. "I'll come," I said. "But if anyone shows up with a clipboard and starts talking about aesthetic perimeter expectations, I'm flipping a table." Alan laughed. "Fair enough." He walked back to his car, and I stayed out on the porch a while longer. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe another letter, maybe another law, maybe another Karen. But tonight felt like peace. It had been 3 months since the garage sale that sparked a neighborhood war. 3 months since the flyer taping, police visits, fake court documents, and one HOA president's very public downfall. You'd think things would have gone back to normal by now. But truth is, things were better than normal. For the first time in years, people weren't walking around our neighborhood like they were scared of being cited for planting the wrong color flowers. That Saturday marked the official vote to restructure the Cielo Ridge HOA. Jason showed up early with coffee, cracking jokes and shaking hands like he was running for re-election, which technically he was, but he'd earned that handshake. Residents had gathered under tents in the HOA community lot, now humorously referred to as the former throne, and instead of Karen standing at a podium with a laser pointer and a laminated binder, the meeting was led by Alan and a small group of new board members who actually listened when people spoke. They'd invited me to say a few words. I'd tried to decline at first, not wanting to make it about me, but Alan insisted. "Matt," he said, "you were the first one to say no when everyone else kept saying, well, maybe we should just go along. People need to hear that again." So I stood up, cleared my throat, and did what I never thought I'd do: speak to a crowd standing under a banner that read, "Community Not Control." "I'm not an HOA member," I said plainly, "and I never will be. But that doesn't mean I want bad blood between neighbors. What happened here didn't happen because of rules. It happened because someone decided the rules didn't apply to them. Or worse, that they got to rewrite the rules for everyone else." A few nods in the crowd. I didn't set out to make trouble. I just wanted to sell some tools, clean out a shed, and meet a few folks. And what I got was a reminder of what happens when people let silence become agreement. But here's the thing. We didn't stay silent. Not this time. Applause broke out. Honest, loud, uncoordinated applause. "Now," I added, "if someone wants to host a taco truck on their driveway, I suggest we start a line and not a lawsuit." More applause, some laughter. Someone yelled, "Seconded!" After the vote passed and the new bylaw revisions were unanimously approved, including clauses that strictly limited HOA jurisdiction to only actual members, the meeting wrapped up with a block party in the cul-de-sac. There were grill stations, folding chairs, games for kids, and live music from a surprisingly competent neighbor-led bluegrass band. Even the mayor stuck around well past sunset, sipping sweet tea and high-fiving toddlers. As for Karen, she pleaded guilty to multiple misdemeanor counts: harassment, misuse of position, falsifying HOA communications, and making fraudulent legal threats. She was sentenced to 5 years probation, a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA or civic board, and was ordered to pay $48,000 in restitution to residents she'd unlawfully fined. Her home went up for sale the next week. No HOA sponsorship listed this time. I didn't see her pack. I didn't care to. When I got back to my place that night, I found a sign had been nailed to the community bulletin board near my driveway. Clean white wood, big black letters. "Welcome to Freedom Market territory. No HO, no tyranny. Yes, garage sales." Underneath it, someone had added a little arrow and a laminated photo of a possum. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the porch steps. These days, the shed is still empty, except for a few things I couldn't let go of: a cracked leather belt sander, my uncle's folding stool, and one very worn metal sign that reads, "Sale today. Everything must go." I keep it on the wall just in case, because every now and then someone drops by to say thanks. Someone who saw the story on TV, or read about the lawsuit, or got fined by their own HOA, and needed to talk to someone who didn't blink when the clipboard brigade came knocking. And when they ask me how to deal with it, I tell them the same thing every time. You don't have to yell, you don't have to fight, but you do have to stand up. Then I offer them a chair, and if they're lucky, a spare garden gnome with a little chipped smile, salvaged from that first sale, still grinning through the dust.